Hi, I'm Adrienne Shapiro of Access Advocacy, fifth generation mother of a child with sickle cell. And I'm going to be speaking with you today on raising a warrior from birth to adulthood. I have no disclosures other than being mom. So I really thought about this and I thought, well, what could I give you that could help, really, really help? And this is a big subject. Um, and it take a lot longer than 20 minutes. So I want to all of you to have copies of these slides, and I've tried to compact things that I think will be helpful at all stages. So part of the psychology or physiology of when you're pregnant is you just dream about what your life is going to be with this child, this being that you've been blessed with. And for me, my beautiful, perfect baby was big eyes, beast on lips, and curly hair. And I think it's universal. And I also think it's hormonal because I think both moms and dads do that. And it's the way, we're programmed. Next slide. So one day, what happens when you get this diagnosis that or some sign that your beautiful child is not? So whether you get it from a letter with newborn screening, which is what I did, or a blood test someplace later in life, suddenly what you thought you knew, you don't. All right. So from that point on, everything in your life is seen through a lens, or I used to call it the sickle cell lens, but it's basically the lens of uncertainty. And that is health, safety, financial, knowledge, all of that comes in between you and being the parent you want to be to the child you thought you'd have. And so there's this grief, right, of what you thought your life was going to be like. And now there's this shock. And you go through these stages, it's you're like shock and then no. Like me, I took Marissa to I don't know how many places we had, I don't know how many tests. And each one I thought, no, they're going to find out that it's not true. And then suddenly it was true. And then I was sad. And then I felt so guilty because I should have known, and I should have known that they could do bad tests, and I should have all of these things. And then because I had been living with sickle cell all my life, watching my brother, I knew what the diagnosis meant. And did I have acceptance of it? I don't think I ever did. So it's not like the periods of grief with death, because at some point with death, there's an end. But for us at this point, it's the beginning. And not only is it the beginning, it is something that we're going to experience all through our lifetimes and our journey with our warriors. Whenever we're up against something that is challenging. Next slide. So, what do parents worry about? And so I know we talk a lot about warriors and sickle cell, but I'm using this term disabled here because disabled, in many ways, people think of it as being a label. But really for us, it's part of our diagnosis. And that diagnosis helps us put some things in place, right? So I'm using the term, I know, because I want us to kind of get used to that, all right, to that term, right? Doesn't mean you've done anything wrong, doesn't mean there's anything to your child, but yeah. So the struggle comes even with that, saying my child is is disabled, and dealing with our own emotions as parents, because if we don't deal with our emotions and we don't handle our stress and aren't aware, then we can't be the best parent to our child. And truth be told, one of the other lessons I've learned is that all parents worry, right? And so we are have that level of worry that would be like a healthy child worry with this really, really um, a, this diagnosis of a journey that we know is going to be much more difficult. So you're trying to figure out, how do I handle everything, right? I feel so guilty. My husband was like, no, it couldn't be. The marriage. So all of these things, the stress, the figuring out how you're going to support your child, um, figuring out resources. So again, back to that label. If if you have a child that's genetically disabled, then there are things from birth, from very beginning, that you can put in place, resources, and that can help you, give you support, because support is the thing that's going to help you get through this. And so there are resources, there are schools, there are agencies, your health care team, all of these things now that we have in place that weren't there certainly when my brother was born, and not there when Marissa was born, that now you can pull together. And the idea of making these medical decisions. So again, in the beginning, you were just going to have to decide to vaccinate and when, right? And what happens when they're cold. Now we're going to have to do a deep dive really into um, medical terminology, disease pathology. All of these things um, are a huge mountain as we're entering it. And then, most startling for us, is that inability to protect our child from pain. Next slide. So, so that fear of not, right? Um, and the not knowing. So imagine that you're holding your child and you're going like into a dark room and there are obstacles, and you are hesitant to move your feet forward, right? Because you're used to having the light. That's what this fear and this worry is about. And so I want you to know all of that is normal. All of that is what you're going to go through. And understanding that it's normal, and that you as a parent will be able to do these things is insurmountable, right? So it's normal to worry, and these are real situations, and you will find your way. And as I've said, now we have help, real information, but all of this stuff that wells through you as a new parent um, will also come through you again when you're hit with things like a new complication, a new city where you're finding new doctors, a new school. Um, all of those things are real and natural. And at each stage of your life and your child's life, you are defining a new normal. Next slide. So the first thing I can give you of advice or things hard learned: take care of yourself. You have to take care of yourself so you have the energy to take care of your child. Now, it's natural to give, right? But then you give out. And we see this so often. So you find small ways to take care of yourself. I learned how to have a nap standing up, right? not recommended, but yeah, that's what I did. Um, find what calms you, prayer, and practice that. um, Eat well, right? I used to carry quarters to vending machines, and now I know that that's like would get that sugar would get me through, but then I would have a crash. Um, Again, we know much more about nutrition in our own bodies and how all of that affects us. I think, and balance. Balance is really hard because again, that lens you're looking at your entire life now is different. That lens of sickle cell and what that I call it the great disruptor can do to it. Um, uh, Understand that if you have other children, that other children are watching this and that they are as children and siblings want to help and are trying to find ways, and in many times it makes them feel good that they can help, but we have to be mindful of that balance between them helping to them being overly responsible or for them being just sort of, I guess, second in their minds to their sibling that's unwell. And so the other thing we do is we learn to advocate for our child's needs. Nobody's just going to give us stuff, all right? So we get informed, know at each stage what your kid needs and how you can help them and ask, please. I know that families and friends kind of, I might say they kind of peel away like onions as you start this journey and you go on and on. And, but you know what? New, new friends, new support, new family appears and take that. Next slide. So yeah, be realistic. All right. So there's gonna be trade-offs. There are going to be trade-offs in everything you do. And we would have trade-offs again as parents to all healthy children. But the truth is with a warrior, you're going to be making many trade-offs. And I think the thing to do is be flexible and understand that nothing in life is perfect. You want to build your support system. So, if not family, I always say we have family, a blood family, and we have found family. And allowing people to help you um, is a skill, right? Understanding and accepting that help is a skill. And then getting to a point where you can accept help just for you. You might need a nap, to have somebody come over. You might have like so much to do, so much on your plate that you can't be at the hospital by the bedside. So you can ask someone to do that for you for a couple of hours. I think, and keeping your eye, as they say, on the prize is always the big picture. We learned that you could celebrate a birthday on any day, under any setting, a holiday. I think once we had Christmas in April. Um, all of those things help you manage because it relieves that pressure to do things on someone else's life schedule. You have your own journey, your own life schedule, and accepting that and having people in your life that support that is bountiful. And again, the that lens again colors everything. But your kid's your kid, and they're gonna, they're gonna cry when they want a bottle. They're gonna not want to be potty trained. They're going to be terrible twos. They're going to do all of those things that kids do. Oh my God. And we don't talk about when they're teens. So we have to like understand that they're going to do that. Our job is to not only teach them about their health, but our job is to teach them the things they need to know in order to grow into these independent, strong, well-adjusted warriors that we have the grace to see. Next slide. So techniques, all right. Your life changes. I have one career path. I made the choice, right? So understanding that you do have choices and that you're making them, and understanding that you're the choices you're making with what you know right then and there, and that down the line, circumstances can change. You might have new opportunities or new things that you can do or ways to do things, but your life changes. And as with all losses, there's a lot to be gained. Discovering that you have choices, I think, is one of them. Learn the vocabulary of sickle cell disease, right? Understand what a CBC is, understanding what hemoglobin is, learning all that you can, and it's so empowering for you, and it's necessary for your warrior to see you doing this because you understand it's just like you're teaching them ABCs and how to count and how to read, and how to speak. The sickle cell vocabulary is a language for them. It's their second language. And so we have to learn it first. And of course, in doing this, it's of course trying the whole time to be positive. And when I say that, I don't mean like friends and family that are positive, like what is it, like throwing you shade. I mean like really positive. Not where they're going to do something for you, but then you have to pay them later, whether it's emotionally. Sometimes it's financially, and that's okay as long as there's not an emotional component to it, and you can. And you've got to really focus on taking that care of finding a health care team for you, just like you do your child. So I kind of think of it as when I got to a point as I have to um, do the things that I'm doing for Marissa for myself, right? I had to have a therapist, right? I had, particularly after I lost my grandmother, I had to have somebody who was in my corner who I could talk to, who um, I I had an unconditional relationship with my truth. Exercise, 5 minutes of it, 10 minutes of it. You've got to do that, get those endorphins, relax. I'm famous for saying I can meditate for a minute. A minute is better than no minutes. And as much as you can, juggle or stay engaged with the family. It's hard. It is very hard, but make it like you have ritual. Ritual's important. So maybe you can't be at every birthday party, but you can set a goal for being there at Thanksgiving, or you might be able to do Christmas Eve. But give yourself the gift of ritual with family. Next slide. So how you raise a child with SCD? I say you raise them the way you would any other child. They need boundaries. They need all the things that all your kids need. They need them sometimes on steroids, and sometimes you have to, they have a thing where they're engaging with adults much sooner than most children would if they're in a hospital setting. And so what we've got to do that is kind of teach them, yeah, we have to teach them to stand up for themselves, but doing so in a constructive, respectful way. Um, and we have to give them a chance to be independent, right? That's how you grow self-esteem. Um, so I think of it this way: we give them like a, a 3 feet circle, and then we move to maybe a 6 foot circle, then maybe it's a 10-yard circle. I don't know, but it's creating that structure to watch them safely grow, give them the space they need in order to create or cultivate a lifestyle of knowledge and accomplishments. Next slide. Next slide. So how do you support them? Well, okay. So you have to, from the very beginning, as soon as possible, explain to them what sickle cell is, how they or why they have this disease, that it's genetic, that it's history. Um, you have to, at all times, let them know exactly what is going on with the treatment, right? Uh, let them understand that there are things that happen in the treatment so that they can um, have some control over it. For example, if they're having a blood draw, right, and it hurts, or they've tried 3 times, or even the fact that they need to have a butterfly needle. All of those things are things that empower them and teach them that they can set boundaries and be safe. Um, Breathing, again, all the things that we all need. If you can do it from an early age, I mean, that's why yogis are so amazing, because they start at a young age. Breathing, coping techniques, music, and I think the other thing too is whatever they kind of get an interest in. Um, because they're exploring, right? And the more that they can gain experience in doing different things and in changing, uh, the more secure they will get about having this life, right? That has these disruptions and these patterns. And um, love your children, love them. It's scary. It's scary loving any child. It's it's even scarier loving a child that's um, you know, that's disabled and that you can't control or see their future. Although, yeah, love them. Next slide, please. So, how do you prepare them or get them used to it? It is, as I talk to my children, I will ask them this question and they look at me and they're like, well, it's our life. But I think that communication is really important. I've run into families where they hide a diagnosis, they don't talk about it, and there are real consequences of that. Um, there, there's the internal consequences, and there's also, uh, you know, leaving you open to that child being someplace without you, where they're going to need knowledge about what's going on with their body. And immediately when there is some misinformation, I think we have to talk to them about the truth, right? There's so much talk about your child being born with a death date, right? There's talks about what they can't do. There's talks about how if they're using pain meds, that somehow makes them weaker or less than. These are all things that we have to talk to them about and have them be able to hold a conversation and express how they feel about it, why they're using it, what the purpose for anything is in their life, and stand tall. Now, we can get help with this. Again, help is a good thing. A team. Think of it as a sports team. Everybody on that bench might have a specialty. We put together a bench. We put together a bench for our kids at every stage of life, from when they're tiny babies to when they're in preschool to when they're in, grade school. At adolescence, it becomes really, really important. So you will need experts at each of these stages. As you adapt how you parent, your care team has to adapt and go on to special needs. And of course, there's camp, there's support groups. Fortunately, now we have online meetings, and so we do have things. Please, please, I encourage you to take part in these. Next slide. Now, siblings. So, like a lot of parents who have a first child with sickle cell, I was like, I'm not having another child. Well, fast forward, I did. And I think, again, it is a great gift, right, to have a child in your life. It's a great gift to have a sibling. Having being a sibling to a sister or brother who is unhealthy comes with challenges. On the other hand, it comes with great gifts, and there's a balance that we have to do to um, make sure that that child who uh, who who are non-sickle cell children don't feel ignored. And the other thing is, we also have to be mindful now, as we've gotten more and more information, is that if you have a child that has trait, right? So there are things health-wise that your trait child might be going through too. So we've got to be able to um, take that lens of health and safety and use it to see all of our children, and to make sure that other people aren't treating them differently. I hear stories all the time about how the child with sickle cell got presents and healthy children didn't. In our family, I remember if my brother couldn't go because the weather was bad, none of us could go, right? But what my mom would do is she would give us ice cream and we'd make forts. I mean, she tried to find balance. So I think that's the best word for it, is balance. And all children need to learn it, but stress management. Breathe. I'm a firm believer again in counselors. You're going to hear me say this over and over again. I think in your lifetime, you will probably need several counselors as your needs change, as the stage of your life changes. And I think also, if there's self-destructive behavior for your well child or your four-year, you want to immediately address that. And these behaviors happen again at all stages of development, right? So it's not like I get past 5 or the terrible twos, and then we're not going to have these behaviors. These behaviors can manifest and show themselves at all stages. Next slide. Next slide, please. All right, so how do you as a whole family, everybody has to learn how to decrease stress. We talk a lot about social determinants of health and life, and with all that I'm learning now, the things that we suffer from so much as people of color, really has to do with stress. It's the stress of being a person of color. It's the stress of a history of racism. It's the stress of all of that. It's the stress of living in large cities, or all of that goes into it. So we adding the stress of having our child with a disability, and there's that word again. How do we do that? So first of all, we can't just say grin and bear it. We can't just say um, ignore it and power through it. We have to think about it in a systematic way, right? Um, how can we eliminate stressful situations, right? Um, what happens if your warrior has plans, right, and goes into crisis and can't go, right? How do we as a family handle that that disappointment, that stress? What can we do? How do we keep the big picture? The big picture is that we will have another day. We will have another opportunity because we create opportunities. We will find new rituals, right? Not, nobody's perfect. We aren't perfect, but we're perfect in our imperfection. And then I think really how we develop problem solving skills. I had a career with difficult people because I had great problem solving skills, and that really had to do with having a warrior, right? People would look at me and say, "That's amazing that you could go in there and or that the ability to learn the language of an industry." And again, I had to learn the language of sickle cell. And so there are things that that this great disruptor gives us, and being able to look at those, recognize them, and use them is a great thing. And then how do you spend your time? How do you decide what's really important? And saying no is really a good thing. It's very freeing. No, is this really worth my energy? All of it is your energy, your finances. All of that's your collateral. So be smart about where you invest your collateral. And if you do that and your child grows up understanding that, they will have a more successful path. Next next slide, please. So I could say to you, parenting is one of life's great adventures. And I had Marissa, who um, is my warrior. And I have Casey, who was born with trait. And we are now living in this time when there are more choices, there's more of everything. And then I want you to look at them and I want you to know I did get my curls, my big brown eyes, and my bee stung lips. But I got a lot more. And I think that if there's any message, that's it. We've gotten a lot more. So thank you for listening, and thank you to the consortium for the opportunity to share this. And I hope, this talk may be of use to you. Thank you.